Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Hilary Zwallen.
And I'm Aimee Schreiber. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Intentionists. We have a great episode planned to discuss mindful eating. And before we dive in, the theme that has been coming up for me this week is synchronicity. And so I wanted to take a few minutes and give a little nod to that. Aimee, it's so good to talk to you and be back together with you on the show.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, right? Aimee's been busy pumping out some amazing art pieces. If you've been following us on Instagram, she's super talented. I feel like you're just like totally hitting your stride. And
thank you. I've been having fun.
Good. We're working also on a free beginner's meditation calendar, which will be available hopefully within the next few weeks. And I just got back from a family vacay to Rome, which felt like a huge beginning, like reset for me almost. It was a very unexpected, spiritual transformational trip, I feel like. So
it sounded
anyway.
so cool. She had a ton of great pictures on her Instagram. I don't know if those are still around.
Well, I was thinking about sharing some on our Intentionist Instagram. I just thought for all the people that follow me on my personal site, they're like going to be OD'd. So I figured we'll throw some up in a few weeks when everybody's done. Okay. Because I went completely crazy with it.
That's good stuff.
So synchronicity. So the irony is not lost on me that yesterday I noticed as I was compiling notes for this episode, which was designed to be about mindful eating, which we're still going to talk about. But today is Friday the 13th. And today we are recording our 13th episode. And then this morning, right before we started recording, I've been working with the Rider-Waite tarot deck. And because I'm working on another project, another creative project, and I've been pulling the card every day. And the card I pulled today was the Death card, which most people would maybe freak out about if you don't know a lot about tarot. But the Death card is the 13th card of the major arcana.
Amazing.
So I'm like,
so awesome.
So that's a 3 and a 13. So I wanted to talk about the number 13 since we're recording on Friday the 13th. I know we'll be releasing this probably on the 18th or something, but everybody knows about Friday the 13th. So I felt like it was still relevant.
And my phone just flashed, and so it lit up, and it is 11:13 right now. So there you go.
No way. There we are. Oh yeah,
yes,
9:13. Here we are. That's right.
Oh yeah, I guess you're 9:13.
So a lot of people think 13 is an unlucky number. And I also want to talk about the Death card too, because we brought it up. But so let's talk, do you want to talk about the reference, why it has been referred to as an unlucky number? It stems actually from the Christian tradition.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say that Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus, was the 13th person to sit down at the Last Supper, and also that Jesus was crucified on the 13th, on a Friday the 13th, which is Good Friday.
At least speculatedly so, right?
Yeah, so these are all speculations. But actually, in pre-Christian times, Friday the 13th, it was a celebration of the divine feminine, because the day of the week, Friday, was named after all the goddesses of love, Venus, Aphrodite, and then Freya and Frigg are the Germanic equivalents. And then 13, it's a very female number. There are 13 moon cycles per year, and the moon covers 13 degrees per night. And there's also 13 menstrual cycles for women per year on average.
There you go.
So all sorts of feminine energy around that number.
I know that in numerology, the number 13 is a karmic number. It's the number of upheaval, so that new ground can be broken. It's kind of a transformational number, and it has great power. And also in numerology, you could add the 1 and a 3 together, which turns into a 4, obviously. And that has a different energy too. So the Death card, because we had brought that up, most people, if you're not familiar with tarot and you pull a death card, or a lot of people are worried about getting a reading because they don't want to pull the death card because it means like they think it means that they're going to die or somebody else is going to die. And maybe it does, but I look at this like when we pulled it, it was like, oh, the death card. Look, we're wrapping up a cycle. Hopefully, I like what you said before we were live, Amy, which was now we're just going to kick out like super awesome episodes from here on out. We've done we've done our first 13 learning curve, and now we're going to kick out all this awesome stuff, hopefully. Right?
Yeah. Hopefully ironed out all of the issues, and now it's just awesomeness from here on out.
Let's hope so. So synchronicity, we were talking about this before we got online today, and even just a few days back. I feel like I haven't hardly talked to you at all because I've been gone and you've been working.
I know.
Just a whole bunch of stuff. But when we did talk, which was for like 10 minutes the other day, I was like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about all the stuff that's been happening. And it just feels so magical. Like everything is lining up for me in these really weird ways. And I was telling you about this book that I was reading, and then you were like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this book that I'm reading. And it wasn't the same book, but it was basically a book on the same subject.
Exactly. Yes.
I thought, I love it.
We are linked.
So synchronicity was first introduced by analytical psychologist Carl Jung, which holds that events are meaningful coincidences, even if they occur with no relationship, yet seem meaningfully related. So anyway.
Yes, these meaningful coincidences. I know, like, as human beings, we are evolutionarily hardwired to search for meaning in things that happen to us. And some people would say that this is just like superstitious stuff, but I say it's super fun stuff. It's like
I like that way of looking at it.
So yeah, I feel like life has been super magical lately.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know enough about astrology to be like, what's going on in the cosmos? Because it sure felt like 2 months ago, everyone that I was talking to was like, it's so hard and everything's really hard.
Yeah.
And now I'm feeling like everyone I'm talking to is like, oh my gosh, things are just kind of happening for me in these weird ways. So I don't know if that's the case, or it's just a personal, like the ending of a personal cycle. But I know that one of the synchronicities you and I were having, and part of this Rome trip, I just want to talk about it really briefly before we dive into our mindful eating stuff. But the way that this Rome trip came about was my mom worked for United Airlines forever, and she has these buddy passes. She's retired now, and they cycle through our family. And this was our year to go, and she wanted me to bring my kids, and I was really resistant to it because, you know, bringing kids on like a 15-hour flight, my kids are 8 and 5. I was just like, this is going to be a nightmare. And normally if I go to Europe, which is every couple of years, it's like this sacred time for me and my husband to go and like enjoy, you know, our adult vacation. And anyway, this whole thing was, it really felt like, you know, we ended up going, I didn't even realize we were there during Holy Week until I got there, obviously. And it was like Disneyland in Rome because there were so many people. But we showed up to the Vatican on Palm Sunday, and the choirs were singing, and it was just so beautiful. And then on Good Friday, I had this day by myself, and I didn't even realize it was Good Friday because, you know, when you travel, you're just kind of like, it's a fog. It's just like, oh, it's another day that I wake up, and what day am I leaving? And you kind of lose track of things.
Right.
And my husband woke up kind of sick, and I ended up getting to go. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to just go by myself and enjoy the last day in Rome. And I was kind of sad about it because I thought, oh, I wish he could come with me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I get to go by myself and I can do whatever I want.
Yes.
So it just felt like this whole divinely led day for me, where I went to this Leonardo da Vinci museum. The lady was like, go to the catacombs. And I went, and so I was like, which one? Where do I go? And she told me which one to go to. And it was kind of all of these things had to line up in order for me to hit everything that I hit in the amount of time that I got, because I was supposed to get off at the Colosseum, but the Pope was at the Colosseum. So I wasn't sure where I was going to go. And then I ended up, you know, going along this random lost journey. And I eventually get to the catacombs right as the tour is starting in English. And I just pop right in, and everything just lined up. And it felt like this really beautiful merging of what I discovered that day, aside from just having a wonderful day alone and getting to experience, sacred spaces and beauty and art and all of that, was this idea of, for you and I, we've had this journey where we were Mormon and then we were like questioning everything. And now we've been discovering all these other ways of connecting to spirit, to God, to the creator. And what Rome was for me was this beautiful marriage of what the land was like and the landscape was like pre-Christianity and post-Christianity, and kind of the beauty of the pagan stuff and also the beauty of the Christian stuff. And it really sparked my interest as to what was really going on in that first and second century post-Christ, because what we have really is a lot of information from the Christian point of view, because that's what survived, right? And so then I go to Modesto, and I'm going to wrap this up, I promise. I'm sorry, I'm just going on and on.
No, I love it.
Then I come home and I'm like, really, my curiosity is really piqued. And I bought a couple books about the catacombs, and I bought a couple books about early Christianity. And I go to my public library here in Modesto, and I know the children's section, but I really don't know I don't go in and get my own books because I'm just there with my kids very often. And, but I feel like, the quote unquote gods are alive in the library. Do you ever feel like this, Aimee?
Yes.
You feel like so much more led and inspired in the library. So I always play this game with myself when I go into a library, and I'm like, okay, just take me to wherever I'm supposed to go today and whatever I'm supposed to learn. And I just kind of wandered straight through the library, and I walked straight up to the 10 books on early Christianity. And there was a book called Paganism and Early Christianity. And this guy that writes the book, he just died. I was Googling him last night because I wanted to have him on our show. He was 90 years old when he died about 3 years ago. He wrote this book called, Pagans and Early Christian Rome. And he was a professor at CSU Fresno,
oh, wow.
which I thought was really crazy. So I just felt like the whole thing was like, what are the odds that this guy that writes this book and he was talking about, and granted, the book was printed in 1984, so maybe there's more books that have been done recently from the pagan perspective. But his point was that it was really hard for him. He actually translated several documents from Greek and Latin into English that were pagan works talking about the Christians, trying to understand, we hear about persecution, and I see this a lot within Mormonism too, right? Where you and I can relate to this. We were raised on the idea that, Mormons were persecuted and kept being driven out and driven out and driven out. And I never understood why. I was like, why would people just keep trying to drive the Mormons out? And you're not really talked about the why. And then you dig into the history, and it's like, oh, I kind of get why they were driven out. Because the leadership was doing some stuff that was a little questionable. So it's caused me to, now I try to be a critical thinker whenever I'm approaching history and saying, well, gosh, what are both sides of the argument? Anyway, so that's my little roundabout long story of synchronicity.
No, I want more. What did he find out? What did he say about the early Christians from this other perspective?
Well, I don't know yet because I just started the book last night and I'm only 10 pages in. And so I will let you know. We'll have to do an episode on it.
Okay, you're leaving me hanging. Yeah, we will.
Because it was definitely, so I'm reading the book now. Because that's kind of what I'm trying to understand, because clearly it's not like a romanticized version of just like, oh, these poor pagans in Rome and the Christians came. It's like, no, I mean, the Romans, like 30% of the Roman citizenship in antiquity, around that time of Christ, they were all slaves. I mean, the Romans built all their amazing buildings with slavery, so it's not like they were completely enlightened and there was all this utopia and, whatever. So I just would
it's
say
kind of a true history version of Rome. Right.
So it's just kind of looking at both sides of it going, these are two groups of flawed people, and what won out was Christianity. And obviously there's a lot of really beautiful teachings in Christianity, and there's a lot that I really that I really enjoy about Christianity. But it's just so much power. You really go to Rome and you feel the power of kind of the egos of humanity, right? Like these emperors were super egomaniacs, and they're building these huge monuments and things to themselves, which on the one hand is amazing for us in this time period to go, my gosh, look at what was possible back then. Look at the geometry, look at the architecture, look at all of these things. But on the other hand, you think, my gosh, it was all built on the backs of slaves. It was built on there's a lot of wealth that has basically been taken over the centuries, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but just what it is it's a physical manifestation of the human struggle of power, right? And it's played out in this really amazing way through architecture, art. There's the beauty aspect of it, and then there's also the ugliness, right? Which is so much life as it is anyway, right? So,
which is in everything.
Right.
Including food, right?
Including food. Okay. Aimee, take us into mindful eating, please.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to do this as part of our Be Your Own Healer series and talk about the physical body, specifically nourishing our bodies with mindful, intuitive eating practices. So this is putting the right things in your body for the right reasons. You wrote down a really good quote. Hilary, do you want to read that?
Sure. So this is from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's written a ton of books on mindfulness. I think he's actually he kind of coined the term. But he says, mindfulness is all about paying attention and the awareness and freedom that emerges from that present moment gesture of profound relationality and consciousness. It is the antidote to addictive preoccupations, and indeed preoccupations of all kinds that carry us away from the actuality of the present moment.
So that applied to eating is really the ideal state we want to be in while we're consuming our food. The physical body in yoga philosophy is called the Annamaya Kosha, which is Sanskrit meaning sheath of food. So you literally are made of food. And eating is one of the most intimate interactions that we can have with our physical environment. So when you really bring mindfulness, like what the kind that they're talking about in that quote, to the act of eating, it's a powerful practice.
Absolutely. I think something that I've noticed, and I mean, I always hesitate to even bring up, I think mindful eating is such a great topic because it's pretty benign, right? It's not saying you have to have the Whole30, or you have to be vegan, or you have to do paleo, or you have to whatever. There's a lot of, at least in American culture, there is a lot of shoulding happening around diet. And then there's also what we're kind of combating against, which is our lifestyles, which are fast paced, and we're we aren't home cooking much, or a lot of us aren't. I know I'm having to run through the drive-through often when I'm like, oh, we've got karate and soccer, and so we're eating fast food, and a lot of that food isn't totally real food, right? Or at least it's not whole food. It's very highly processed foods, which our bodies probably haven't completely evolved far enough to be able to digest all of that in a way that's really healthy, as we've seen, because now we have this problem called obesity in the United States, and there's a lot of people that don't know what's happening. Some of this has a lot to do with the food that we're eating. So what I like about mindfulness is this is really an approach that we can all take, myself included. I'm the least mindful eater of anyone I know, I feel like. Where we can use this mentality to approach how we consume our food to help us, rather than worrying about maybe exactly what we're putting in our body, but if we're present to the food as we're putting it into our bodies, we will most likely choose to eat the right amount and the right things because we're listening to our bodies. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it does. Because if you start with just the awareness is what you begin with, and that awareness causes you to make better choices for your body. And I like how you said that, like, accounting for individual differences and trying to steer away from like certain hard and fast rules, like diet fads, those things, like all the isms, I think can be dangerous because they don't account for individual differences between people. As much as I would love just like a list of things to eat and not eat.
Right.
I have tried that and found that it takes a little more thought than that.
Well, there's always that principle of individuality, right? Like we're all, what works for one person just doesn't work for another person. And what works for one person right now may not work for them in 5 years, right? We're all, like our bodies are changing and evolving throughout our lives.
So yeah, so bringing the awareness and the intuitive part of it is figuring out like what is for you, right? Like what is right for your body at this time. And that's why I think it can be helpful to study maybe some different holistic systems that talk about the body as far as like the Ayurvedic stuff, Chinese medicine, Hermetics, even like just normal physiology and anatomy. Because all those things, they account for individual differences, which is important, I think, when figuring out what it is you need to be eating, like to be healthy, reach your potential of health.
I like that. I have a quote from a book that I read when I was prepping for this. It's by the author Jan Chosen Bays, and the book is called Mindful Eating. And she says, mindful eating is an experience that engages all parts of us, our body, our heart, our mind, in choosing, preparing, and eating food. It involves all the senses, immerses us in the colors, textures, scents, tastes, and even sounds of drinking and eating. It allows us to be curious and even playful as we investigate our responses to food and our inner cues to hunger and satisfaction. And I love that. I feel like it really sums it up because I don't know about you, Amy. We hardly ever sit down and eat a meal together as a family. I'm usually like, my kids are usually eating, I'm feeding them, something's different than what I'm eating. And my husband is eating something different than what I'm eating. You know, there's like 4 things happening. And so food is like a pretty stressful thing, I would say, for our family. We don't have this like idyllic where we all sit around. And then when we are sitting around at the table, it's like trying to keep my kids sitting in their seats. Like they want to get up and walk around. And it's like, dude, eat your freaking mac and cheese. You know what I mean? So I like how she brings it back to the idea that, you know, it's not just eating the food, it's preparing, it's choosing, and it's kind of being present to the full process. Do you have anything you can relate to on that, Amy?
Well, yeah, I like how she talks about like being curious and playful with it, as far as like really exploring like what it is that you're putting into your body. And I think like, especially with kids, the more you talk about the food, like I was just reading this book called Savor about mindful eating by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk. But he was talking about how like pointing out all the textures, all the flavors, the smells, the colors of the food, and like approaching it from a very all-encompassing, mindful way. It's fun for kids. Like kids like to do that, and kids like naturally will get the appreciation and the understanding that like, yes, the entire universe can be found in this little piece of bread, you know, that you're eating.
I love that. I honestly felt myself relaxing even as you were saying that. I was like, oh, that is a solution that can really help me. I'm going to try that next time. Because I will say, last night we were sitting there eating dinner, and my son, my 5-year-old, is like the pickiest eater on the planet. And we were talking about, well, when you grow up, you need to, you know, we try to eat healthy food now, but it's really important as you get older to eat healthy food, because it just makes it easier on your body. And Parker goes, yeah, when I'm an adult, I'm going to eat salad. And he was like, but not now, you know? So anyway, it just made me think of like you know what, maybe if I approach it to like, what are the smells? What's the color of that? Like, what does it look like? What are, trying to bring in and making it a more imaginative, fun experiential experience for kids, that would be really helpful. Thank you for sharing.
Or even let them touch it. Like, let them eat it with their hands. Like, I think in India, they eat everything with their hands. And making it even more like you're using all your senses. You're really feeling it in your hand, and you're like, I don't know. It's just another element, another side to that like you can trick them into eating those little like tomatoes and carrots in the salad and stuff if they can like play with the leaves and do a little art project on their plates with it.
And I think it's also important to note that this has really nothing to do with counting calories, with
right.
I know that it can be, I was even a little bit hesitant as we were getting closer to recording this, Aimee, because I think, food can be such a trigger for people. And this topic is such a trigger, for just various reasons. But I wanted to include, this is according to the Mindful Eating book that I read by Jan Chosen-Bays. She wrote down elements of a healthy relationship to food. So, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, because I'm like, I think I agree for the most part. But it says you feel, so I'm just going to go through the list. Number 1, you feel happy and fully engaged in life when you are not eating, meaning that you don't need food to be part of the experience to feel complete.
Like you're not constantly preoccupied.
Yes. With thinking about food.
Okay.
2, if you're not feeling hungry, you don't eat. To me, this is a big one for me, because I find if I'm bored, I usually eat. It's not even like most of the time when I eat, I'm not even that hungry. That's something that I've been becoming aware of, is like, sometimes I'm just wandering through the house, like putting stuff in my mouth just because I'm like hanging out in the kitchen. So it's there and I might as well eat it. You know what I mean? So if you're not feeling hungry, you don't eat. Number 3, you stop eating when you feel full and you're able to leave food on the plate. So were you, I don't know about you. I know I was kind of raised in the sense that it was like, clean your plate, and this was kind of before. I feel like there's a lot of rhetoric now on, just letting kids kind of control the amount that they put in their bodies and not shaming them either way. I think for us, it was really, I think it was benevolent. It was more about like, hey, we don't want to waste food, so don't waste it, I think we've all heard as Americans, the starving children in other places of the world, and you get to eat all this mac and cheese if you want it, or whatever it is, all this pizza. You better finish your freaking pizza, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I know for me as an adult, it's been hard for me to just allow food to be on my plate. I usually like to clean my plate because that's like how my mind is. Are you that way or no? Are you easier? Is it easier for you to leave things on the plate?
I definitely used to be that way all the time, and I would like take pride in eating a ton, well, especially if we go out to restaurants, which they give you an insane amount of food, enough for like 10 people. So if I could finish that, I'd feel super proud of myself. But yeah, now I don't so much feel worried if I leave anything on the plate. I'm a lot better at like getting the right amount of food so that I don't have to waste it at the end.
That's a good point.
I've been working on like not making enough food for 10 people because there's only 3 of us. And see that I have no one really likes leftovers. What is the right amount? Yeah, especially for like groups of people. I've recently had a few parties and it's hard. Yeah, I don't know. I always end up having like 3 times as much food as is necessary. Yeah, I feel like 4 years of actively trying to not have things left at the end. It's starting to pay off a little bit, but yeah, it's taken about 4 years of trying.
Yeah, I think it does. It's legitimate reprogramming, I think, for a lot of people, right? Just depending on how you were raised. Like everybody's got our own different ways of how parents brought us up. I think I'm definitely downloading my kids with stuff that's probably not going to be helpful in various ways, Number 4, you have intervals of at least several hours where you're not hungry or thinking about food. Number 5, you enjoy eating many different kinds of foods. Number 6, you maintain a healthy weight that fluctuates within a range of 5 to 7 pounds, and you don't need to weigh yourself more than once every few months. I was a little bit hesitant to share that one because I feel like that could be a big, that could be debatable. I don't know. What do you think about that, Aimee?
Debatable in what way, though? Like, in general, like, fluctuating weight, yeah, like more than 7 pounds is not considered normal. So that's fine.
No, I see what you're saying. I think the healthy weight thing that fluctuates 5 to 7 pounds, that makes sense. Because I think if it's fluctuating more than that, there could be a hormonal thing going on, which would be like probably something separate.
Or you're pregnant.
To your what you can control. So if it's, or it could be impulsive eating, like maybe you're using it as, it's an emotional impulse. I've definitely, when I was doing White Plum, I felt like eating was totally my, that was like my emotional cushion, was like when I would get stressed, I would just go eat a cookie, you know what I mean? Or multiple cookies. And then number 7 was you don't obsess about food or count calories in order to decide if you can afford to eat something. That you're really listening more to, what does my body need in this moment? And sometimes it needs the brownie, right? Sometimes it does need the brownie. Sometimes it needs a salad, it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing I would say in general. All those sound good to me, except on number 2, I would say yes, in general, if you're not feeling hungry, you shouldn't eat, but not to disclude those moments where you just want to eat something for pleasure because it's a pleasurable experience. And
or social.
I'm like, waiting until you're all the way hungry. Actually, I don't know, because if you're really in touch with your body and really aware of like your cues, then that's a good thing. And you probably wouldn't eat when you're not hungry. Never mind. I take that back. I agree with all
Do you
those.
want to look through I have a list beyond this, which is this, she goes on to list the 7 types of hunger, which I think really help to tune into the mindfulness part of the mindful eating part of things. The first one is I hunger. So, and I think the point was to recognize these different types of hunger and know what it is that's running you in that moment, so you can make the decision of whether or not it's the right time to do whatever. And obviously this is like a lot of analysis around it. So maybe you don't even need to do this much, but the idea is I hunger is, advertisers love this. This is like when you're walking down the street and there's like a billboard that has like all these, ooey gooey chocolate, fudge factory, whatever it is that's being made. And you're like, oh my gosh, I need chocolate.
It's about the visual.
Right. Or you're watching the Super Bowl and they do that zoom in on like the steak and it looks so delicious and just makes you want to go to Chili's or wherever they're advertising. So that's I hunger, and recognizing that, like, she uses an example in the book of being on like a long flight, or this was her. And then the second one is nose hunger. And she uses this example of being on a long flight and having, like these long international flights, and they just kind of like feed you twice, and it's totally not in line with your body, because by the time you're getting your second meal, it's like probably 3 a.m, your usual time, but it's like 11 in the morning, wherever you're landing or whatever your times, your body clocks off. And so you're kind of like full and feel weird and bloated on the plane. And then you get off the plane and Cinnabon is like right by your gate, and you're like, oh, I need Cinnabon now, even though I'm totally full and feel weird. That's nose hunger, right? It's sense, it smells.
Yeah, it smells so good.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. So what's the other one? What's mouth hunger?
So mouth hunger, I believe, is like when you taste something and it's really tastes good, and it's like, do you want to, like, maybe you eat more than what your body actually wants of it. I think of like a good cheesecake, or, if you're having pizza and it's so good and you're like, it's just so good, I'm just going to keep eating. Do you know what I mean? Even though you're not paying attention to what is going on in your body, and like when to stop. Right. Stomach hunger is, and then this number 4, stomach hunger, this is like when you're listening to your body and maybe your stomach's like gurgling and it's hungry. So it's like, oh, I should honor the fact that there's no food in my body right now, right? And eating that way. That's more like listening. And then cellular hunger, she uses the example, this is number 5, cellular hunger. She uses the example of kind of this seasonality of things, or that like when you're hot, you're not that hungry. You kind of like lose your appetite because you want to drink and drink and drink.
Right.
Like if you're really, really extremely hot. And,
definitely noticed that here.
yeah. And then vice versa, when you're cold, really wanting to eat that comfort food, that's kind of a cellular thing, right? That's as your body is conditioned by your genes and by the cycles of the earth and by your caveman. It's like your inner caveman calling and saying, winter's coming, load up because it's going to be hard. And we don't live in that time now. We live in like a time where we can like get so much food. If you're in, modern, like first world situations, obviously there are places that are struggling with food, but yeah, for most of us here in America, we can go to the grocery store and buy whatever we want any time of year, and we don't need to load up because it's there. Mind hunger is just like thinking about food, wondering about food. And then heart hunger is that idea that maybe we need food to help us cope with whatever's going on. So kind of asking yourself those questions when you're getting into a mindfulness practice around food, what is calling me? Is it my stomach is hungry? Is my mind telling me it's time to eat? Am I feeling sad? So I just want whatever,
I did a really interesting e-course last summer, and it was called Dietary Transformation from the Inside Out. And it was all about reframing your relationship to food. And this guy who did it, his name is Charles Eisenstein. But one of the things that he talks about a ton in all the coursework was identifying the unmet need behind your cravings for food. And the way that he said to do this was by asking, like, what hurts and what do I really want? And just continuously asking yourself this question, like to get to the root of these unmet needs that are often emotional, that are behind like the physical cravings for food that is often unhealthy for us, because the sugar is what tastes the best, right?
Right. And then if you have the sugar, your body craves salt. So then you want the potato chips. This is why like the popcorn and soda, or the, like they create a literal addictive thing going on in your body, because when you drink the super sugary thing, your body is always trying to create balance with this kind of contracting and expanding qualities in our food, right? So like sugar would be an expansive quality, as salt is more contracting. And so, if you're eating something that's extremely sweet or extremely salty, your body's going to crave the opposite to try to bring it back into balance.
Yeah, the other interesting thing that he talked about in this course was allowing yourself to feel the full effects of everything you eat. So basically spending a ton of time in contemplation and meditation, just noticing like, how does this thing that I ate feel in my body? Like not judging yourself, not being all like upset and guilty, but just noticing like, oh, I ate this thing. And now how does my body feel, down to like from your head down to your toes? And I actually tried this last night because I've eaten a mostly vegan diet probably for the past five years or so. And last night we went out to eat, and I've been trying to like figure out, I think I need to eat some more calories, especially when it's hot and I just don't even feel that hungry and I just want to like drink agua frescas all day.
Right.
So I ordered a steak from this restaurant, and it was super delicious. It was covered in this berry sauce. It was like berry red wine sauce, and it was just like really, really nicely cooked. So I was trying to like really understand, how does this feel in my body? Like, do I need to be eating meat? Like, what is going to be the effect, especially as someone who doesn't doesn't often eat animal products.
Right.
And so, yeah, the verdict is
so how was
questionable. It was delicious. Like, but like overall, the verdict is questionable because I had a tiramisu also afterwards. So I felt
it wasn't a controlled.
Sick.
It wasn't a controlled experiment, is what you're saying.
No, it wasn't. Yes. It wasn't at all. So I've been feeling a little weird today and since then. But it was actually really strange. I've been meditating at night before bed, and I had a super hard time doing it last night. Like I just felt like my mind was just like heavy. I don't know if it had to do with the meat or the sugar or the dairy or what. So yeah, I'll have to do a better controlled experiment next time.
Well, I definitely think that has a lot to do with it, right? I mean, there's so many different spiritual traditions that talk about fasting and, you know, have certain diet codes and that are said to help with, you know, spiritual awakening and opening your mind. And you can see how, but I think also that's very different for everybody, you know, because I know some people would say, oh, if I eat dairy, I feel like I can't meditate. It just really messes me up. And then other people are like, no, dairy's fine. So that's fascinating. I mean, that's a really interesting thing to notice. And like you said, because especially having not had meat for so long, I mean, as long as I've known you, you've been vegan. So that's like a really big thing to go have a steak when you're vegan. Was there like guilt associated with it at all? Or what do you think? I mean,
there was a little bit. I was trying to make it this like meditative experience where I'm like imagining the cow and thanking the cow for its life force and like hoping that it wasn't brutally murdered in like a really painful way. So like as I start imagining the cow, then I'm like, well, it probably was brutally murdered in a really painful way. Yeah. And now I'm eating all that pain of the cow and oh no. But like, I mean, yeah, I try not to get too hung up on that because I feel bad enough for like killing a plant to eat it. So it's just like, right. Plants, animals, you know, where do you stop? So.
Right. Exactly. No, I see. But I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, I totally get the principledness of being a vegan. And I do think in general, we probably use too many animal products. But like you said, for someone, I eat meat. I actually eat more meat now than I have in a long time because I have to be gluten-free for celiac disease. And I find it's really hard to be gluten-free, dairy-free, meat-free, you know? So I'm pretty much gluten-free, mostly dairy-free. And I just find I have to have some meat every once in a while because it's just too hard with what I'm going through. But I get I mean, like you said, we're all on our own paths. And I think the idea is, I love that you brought it up, though, that you were thinking of the process of how the meat came to be, because how often does anyone think like that? You know, I think it's very rare that we sit down and go, what happened for this animal? Like, what did this animal have to go through for me to be able to enjoy my dinner? You know, it's an interesting question to ask.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, and that's what the mindful eating book talks all about. Thich Nhat Hanh, he talks all about looking deeply at the food we eat. And he says, when we do this, we see that it contains the earth, the air, the rain, the sunshine, and the hard work of farmers and all those who process, transport, and sell us the food. And so all of that, it fosters our appreciation of the constant support that we get from other people and from nature and from everything. It increases our feeling of connectedness, which
I love that.
Then in turn makes you less likely to mistreat people or things and just be more thoughtful about your consumption.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think this is really why my guess, this is where I'm guessing it comes from when we say grace over the food, right? I mean, that we ideally we're thanking the animal for giving its life for us to be able to eat. I'm assuming that this is kind of where it came from, right? That we're thanking, I guess, we're thanking God for providing the animal, if that's your tradition, or, you know, acknowledging the animal for having given its spirit for us, you know, so we can eat it. I don't know. But I think regardless of whether you're praying to like a the grandpa in the sky, or you're, thanking the spirit of the animal, the fact that there's a moment of silence and a moment of acknowledgement really helps us to feel more connected to everything that's going on around us, and have that spirit of gratitude, which is always helpful.
Definitely. Yeah. I've been also experimenting with a practice of eating with intention. So similar to kind of like saying grace, except with each bite, you set an intention for the bite. You kind of energize your bite of food with this idea, whether it's gratitude or health or anything. I think the act of focusing and then internalizing the idea with the food is like, it's been an interesting thing. I don't know how like actually magical, like if it is actually aiding in manifestation, but it's definitely aiding in my like level of mindfulness while I've been eating.
I love that, Aimee. I think that's really helpful. I hope that our listeners take that and apply that to their lives. I think that's a really beautiful way of approaching. I mean, just, like everything can be a meditation, right? We've talked about our episode on sacred space. It's like, you can create anywhere to be sacred. You can bring that holiness into any moment, and especially into your eating. And then what is it like when we don't have all the shame or the guilt or the, I shouldn't be eating this, or whether it be because of calorie count or because an animal was involved or because it's not organic or whatever it is. I think on top of, there's just so much noise around what we put into our bodies to strip it away and be like, okay, let's just think about this and bring it into this present moment. I think that can be very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, just to sum it up in general, to like guide ourselves to having a more ideal relationship with food, it really comes down to listening to your body, paying attention to how you feel while you're eating and after you're eating. Make it this meditative experience as much as possible. And I mean, and you can do some good nutritional research as well if you like really want to know some specifics and get into the science of it.
Right.
But I think your body will guide you in the right way if you really pay attention.
I've also heard tricks like, or tips, I should say, where like if you wanted to bring in the counting meditation, there's a meditation for, where you just count in your mind. You like count to 20 or you count to 100 or whatever. And that you can do that with the bites that you take, like as you're chewing, that you chew 20 times and then see what the food's like. I mean, then you're really activating your salivary glands. Your food is becoming way more digestible. Because we're not just, I know for me, like I eat faster than anyone I know. I'm always like done with my meal and people are like, oh, like they're just like cutting into their very first bite. And then I'm kind of like, oh, sorry. I always have that moment where I'm like, rein it in, Hill. It's okay. So I'm like, I'm working on that. But I think that's a tip that I read and thought, I'm going to apply that myself. I'm going to try that out today. I'm going to try to take 20 chews for each bite. And then you're also noticing that like, that's going to take you longer to eat, which therefore is probably going to make it so you don't eat as much food when you sit down, or you eat the right amount of food. And that's really the idea, right? It's not that it's don't eat too much, don't eat, or making sure you eat, because you might need to eat more food. Maybe what you need is more food in your body, And like you said, the idea is to bring it back to what your body is wanting.
Yeah, I loved that. I mean, I wanted to try that. Like 2 years ago, I tried really chewing my food a lot of times, and it kind of backfired because I started eating so slow that it's become ridiculous. And I don't have time to eat that slow. Like, I don't have all day to sit and like chew the blueberry. So, so I'm trying to like undo that habit. So yeah, there's definitely a balance. I used to be a champion speed eater too, and I am trying to get closer back to that.
Is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up the episode, Aimee? We're getting close to the end.
Yeah. No, that's all I really wanted to say about that. Just, listen to yourself and let food be your medicine, as Hippocrates says.
Oh, I like that.
I
So
think it's good advice.
yes, before we close out, I just wanted to remind our listeners that we have an Intentionist Circle Facebook group.
Yes.
We'd love to invite you to join us there. Also would love to invite any of you, if you've been listening for a while, if you've been following us on Instagram, or if you're new, welcome. Also, if you would be willing to go to iTunes, leave a rating and review, it's really helpful to us. But we'd love to connect with you on Intentionist Circle. Come like our Facebook page. We're getting more and more active in that space. We're really active on Instagram right now, and we're just trying to figure out where to dedicate our time. If any of you listeners are really smart at this stuff, we'd love to hear from you. Help us, give us any tips that you might have. We're open. Also, we would love to hear, we're going to post this in our Intentionist Circle this week, but we'd love to know feedback on, do you like the episodes where it's me and Aimee talking about a topic? Do you like the interviews we've been doing? Do you like the mix of the two? What would you like to see more of? We'd like to give our listeners what they want. So your feedback is very appreciated, and we'll look forward to talking to you guys again.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.